Hi, I'm Devi Ward-Erickson.
And I'm Alaina Salks.
And you are listening to Sex is Medicine, your number one resource for holistic sex education. Alaina and I are bringing you over 27 years of combined expertise in the field of holistic sexual wellness to help you integrate your body, mind, spirit, and sex.
New episodes drop every Thursday morning, so make sure to like and subscribe on all your favorite listening platforms. And make sure you follow Holistic Sexology Institute on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for your daily dose of Sex is Medicine. Now let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to Sex is Medicine, your number one resource for woke, holistic sex education. I am one of your amazing hosts, Mrs. Devi Ward-Erickson.
And I am Alaina Salks.
Woohoo! And we are happy to be here with our friend and colleague, Mel Cassidy. And so many of you will be familiar with Mel and their work. They are an alumni of Sex is Medicine. We've done a couple episodes of Sex is Medicine with Mel talking about neo-tantra, polyamory. And we are here with Mel today to celebrate an incredible accomplishment and a very, very necessary resource for those of us in the field of sexology and alternative relationships. And Mel, I'm going to give you their bio. Mel Cassidy is a somatic relationship coach committed to the path of liberatory love and rewilding intimacy. They specialize in working with queer and questioning humans and those who love them, exploring post-monogamous relationships with a focus on polyamory, polyamory, and relationship anarchy. And you can read more about Mel in the description of this episode. And I want to say that we have had many students who we have referred to Mel to work with, who have all reported just so much gratitude to have had the opportunity to work with your compassionate, loving expertise and support. So thank you, Mel. I'm so honored and proud to call you a friend and colleague. And I'm so grateful to have you here to talk about your amazing freaking book. I've been listening to it on Audible. So you sent us the book to review and I skimmed it and I'm like, I'm having an issue with like actually sitting and reading right now. And so I've been loving listening to things. And so I remembered that I was so delighted that you did the voiceover for your book because I know not everybody can do that, but it makes such a difference. And the warmth and grace and depth and richness of your voice as you're sharing your work is medicine. It's so soothing. It's a somatic exercise in and of itself. It truly is. As I'm like walking around the clinic, I'm like, oh. So just listening to you express these concepts is like getting an internal massage as you're
Oh,
like
wow.
integrate. I'm really juicing up because it's that good for me. I'm just saying it's that good.
Thank you. I think that's the most beautiful reflection anyone's given me on the audiobook so far. That's lovely.
I'm really digging it. I'm really digging it. I'm really digging it. And yay. And then so you sent us a celebration box and you were going to send it to me in Costa Rica, but it wouldn't get here until like next year, 2026. So we sent it
Probably.
to
Yeah.
Alaina so we could actually do this. And so we want to do this live on air with all of you. So Alaina, drum roll, please.
Okay. So I have their
Radical
beautiful
relating.
box, and we're going to open it up. And inside, we have this incredible, beautiful packaged box with radical relating on the cover.
Ooh, look at that marketing. Look at that marketing. Look at that
I
beautiful
know.
box. Woo woo. Loving it. Loving
Beautiful
it.
ombre, pink and blue.
Love it.
And I
Rainbows.
almost ruined this when it came because it was so gorgeous and I wanted to get into it. And then on the inside, we have this beautiful crinkle paper in here.
And
Rainbow
Alaina, do you want to
confetti.
just turn the box up a little bit? Because there's writing on the edge. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
let's see what that
Can you see
says.
that? I'm blurred a little bit.
May our ways of loving be embodied and liberatory. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the theme. May our ways of loving be embodied and liberatory. And like reclamation of our roots, man,
Yeah.
reclamation of our humanity. Yeah, being in our bodies is like our human nature, right? Like
Well,
that.
and people ask, and I talk about this in the book, like people ask me like why radical? And I'm like, radical comes from the word root. This is really about getting into our roots and honoring that deepest part of authenticity, right? We can grow in all of these different ways, but we have these common root systems.
Yep, 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 yep,
That's
yep.
beautiful.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
All right, more of the box. Get rid of that
Aha.
confetti.
So
Let's
we have
see
this
what's
gorgeous
in
crinkle paper. What is
it.
in here? And there's a lovely tote. Oh, this is
Rewild
gorgeous.
the ways we love. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Rewild, break free.
I'm so excited. I get to keep this for a while. I'll bring it to you when I see you, Davy.
I know we won't see each other for like another 6 months or so. Maybe.
I'll have like my grocery stains on it by the time I give it to you.
It's all good. How about it's a gift? Mel and me to you. And then the
And
book.
then the book.
Oh,
This is so beautiful. So let me turn off my, I feel like I can't see. Can you guys see it?
yes, it's beautiful.
Okay, yes. Radical
Radical relating.
Relating, a queer and polyamory-informed guide to love beyond the myth of monogamy. This
And
is gorgeous.
an actual tangible paperback copy of a book. I miss those so much. I
Yeah.
love them so
Yeah.
much and I miss them so
Yeah.
much. And then a sticker. Woohoo! I want that.
All right.
Radical
Wow.
sticker. Yay!
Wow.
All right.
Hey.
Thank you, Mel's Publishers, for that beautiful, beautiful gift box.
They did such a beautiful job putting those together. And
Yeah.
like this is something with the journey of writing this book is that it has felt so supported at every step.
That's one
And I feel like, I mean, I call it my book baby, right? And I feel like, you know, whenever we birth something that we create, whether it's a life or a creative project, it takes more than a single person to do it, right? It takes a village, it takes a community. And it's been so amazing to feel supported by my publishers and everybody there, and also like all my peers, like you guys, and everyone else who's been excited for the book, and to be supported by my friends and by my clients and my students. Like it has this feeling of like, yes, this was ready to come forth into the world in this weird timing for it all. But yeah.
And something that I've been so loving about the book is having known you for almost a decade now
Yeah.
and being exposed to many of your teachings, whether directly or indirectly, and seeing them all coming together in this book and then expounded upon and deepen into with the lens that you carry, which is so much more expansive than, you know, the mainstream concept of polyamory, and, you know, which is tends to be a very kind of superficial overview of it. And so, and also a very, I'm going to say, cis het white normative view in terms of, you know, the way it's presented in the New York Times articles, you know, and just some of the things that have come across my radar of like polyamory, it's the new fad and blah blah blah. And so, you know, to be listening to your book and integrating this information with, it's anchored with such depth and such profundity in actual history and the actual history of our humanity and how we got to where we are today, and the relationship constructs that we just, you know, absorb as normal, as the default, and how those are actually programs. Those are, it's conditioning that has once again been implanted or forced upon us, right? And how the roots of that implantation, or cultural conditioning, again, is all in capitalism and making money And and some of these concepts that people will fucking die for, or like die on the hill of, two gender and monogamy and blah blah blah, are actually not actually part of our roots as kin, as humans, and our narratives that have been sold to us as just the way things are, when actually they were instituted specifically to for money and power and control.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I'm getting from your book.
Well, and it was really important to me that, like, I think for many people, the journey of exploring non-monogamy, whether it's somewhere that they stay or they don't, I think for a lot of people, it's a doorway into beginning to unpack a lot of those things. And I think there's so many ways we can go at that. We can look at the economics in the world today. We can go into, like, okay, let's look at the impacts of colonialism and supremacy structures and patriarchy, and we can do all these different pieces, but a lot of them are big systems, and there's a limit sometimes to how much we can individually affect those big systems. I think collectively that's different, but unless you have a lot of power and privilege, very challenging. And so where we can immediately affect things is in our interpersonal relationships.
Yes. Amen.
And the metaphor I like to use is, like, we can pull at any single thread, right? There is this tapestry of systems in our world that hold us locked into these states of oppression, that hold us separated from each other, that power hoard, that resource hoard. And we can pull at any single thread to begin unraveling their tapestry. And the thread that I pull on is monogamy, compulsory monogamy, prescriptive monogamy, monogamy that's, yeah, exactly.
Patriarchal monogamy is the term.
Patriarchal monogamy, colonially imposed monogamy, right? This system that says you only get certain rewards if you have at least the appearance of a monogamous relationship. And then, okay, if we want to unpack that, if we want to pull that thread out, what are we doing instead? And there's so many, there's so many books about how to do monogamy, the right way. And we've been lucky that in the last decade, there's more and more books about non-monogamy. But I wasn't finding anything that really spoke to how do we do this, like, reprogramming of our soma, of our hearts, of our minds. Because so many people, even when we know we don't want to do relationships in this oppressive and restrictive and controlled way that replicates these systems of oppression, even when we know we don't want to do it that way, so many people struggle with, well, how do I go about doing this? Because this is the only thing that's been modeled for me. And I've been taught since I was young that this is going to lead to safety. That this is how I'm going to feel safe in a world that is constantly telling me I'm not safe. And then we spiral out as soon as we start to challenge monogamy. And there's moments of panic, and maybe you're cool, but your partner is panicking. And how do we show up for that? So that's really been the origin of, like, a lot of my work, is going, well, what's the deeper, below the surface level? Like, this isn't just about how you manage logistics of sharing your Google calendars. This is this is really about, how do we address what our heart is asking us for? How do we support the experience of safety that the way the systems of the world are designed, they deny us that experience of safety?
Yes. And I love, what I'm loving about your book is the I don't know if this is the way you're presenting. You mentioned that the presentation of it as a guidebook along the path for healthy non-monogamy. And that really stood out for me, because I also resonated with, in the introduction, Kai Cheng Tom talking about how, in the Gen X millennial, like, crazy world of neo, poly, blah, blah, blah. And that was my thing. Like, when I was like 22 and backpacking Hawaii and met some dude and he was poly, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll be poly, and so all of a sudden we're in this relationship. Meanwhile, I have, like, massive CPTSD, like suicidal ideation, like I was just an emotional wreck. And so as a 22-year-old trying to navigate this space of polyamory and having, jealousy come up and hurt come up and having no guidebook or pathway for how to navigate that, and then just being shamed for my human emotions. And well, if you're jealous, it means you're not evolved enough to be polyamorous. And meanwhile, we have attachment traumas, and like jealousy is a normal healthy human emotion that if we can process it, we can get to the other side of it. So I'm just remembering, like, I've been in and out of polyamory at various stages of my life, in and out of polyamorous relationships, I should say, in and out of my life. And the void that this book fills in terms of having a touchstone, a guide for how to navigate these spaces, and also just like empathy and reassurance that I'm not freaking crazy and there's nothing wrong with me because I feel feelings. I've got feelings. So it's like another way of approaching it that doesn't just perpetuate, the harm.
Well, and I think this is a huge thing that you're naming here, the importance of feeling feelings. There has been literature within the world of polyamory that heavily pathologizes people for having feelings, that has encouraged people to shut that down. Some of the I think like 10 or 15 years ago, there were some people who were like really popular within poly circles, and in terms of like what they were writing and what they were creating. And the consequences of what they were sharing with people was basically shut down your emotions, bottle it up, gaslight yourself, and gaslight other people. And that just adds on another layer of oppression.
Yes.
Yep. And I think that what a lot of people have missed is that, going back to your experience of like you're backpacking and, okay, I guess I'm poly now. And like the way that we spiral out, from a somatic perspective, it's because we have nowhere to orient towards, because it's new, right? It's new and it's unfamiliar. And what's new and unfamiliar feels scary to our nervous system. Our nervous system looks for what it knows, even if what it knows is not healthy for us, is not what we want, has not been working. We go for it because it's familiar. And so a lot of people, when they hit that moment of disorientation in their non-monogamy journey, there is this panic, because we're looking for, well, where do I orient to? What's the goal here? If there's no happily ever after, what am I doing? Do I have a happily ever after with anybody? Am I on that like partnership trajectory with anyone, or what's happening to me? How do I know myself? How do I please all these partners? Like there's so much stimulation and not enough of a framework for understanding it through. And so many people have tried to create frameworks that still come in with the biases of white supremacy culture and colonialism and heteronormativity, cis normativity. And as someone who's queer in gender and in orientation, as someone who's a third culture kid, I'm like, I never know what space to put myself in, because I have like such a mixed background. I think the gift of that for me has been to go, well, there's no assumptions. Like I want to come at this from a space of like, there's no assumed right way to do things. I'm really into like, what does the heart tell you? What does your body tell you? What does spirit move you towards? And how can we find a way to honor that works for everybody?
Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. So let's dig into the nuts and bolts. So let's start with where we are now, our modern relationships as they are. Like, so, what we're spoon fed, Gen Z millennials, we were spoon fed this, like, okay, so you grow up and as a vulva owner, I'm a girl. And I grow up and I meet a handsome boy, probably in college, and we get our degrees, and then we get married, and we have a white picket fence and 2 kids, and then we, and that's success. That's success. And we live in a big house, 5,000 square foot house. That's success. And you have a boat, and that's or whatever. I mean, that was a version of success that I was fed a boat. But like, and then you have your partner and whatever, and you have your kids, and you're supposed to be monogamous and live happily ever after. Meanwhile, we know that's not what happens. And I will say, when I was teaching tantra in Vancouver, and tantra and sex work are the same thing in Vancouver, that they mean the same thing. And so in my initial tantra teaching, I had clients come and they were coming from a hand job, and I thought I was coming to teach them meditation. They were coming from a hand job. But my point in all of this segue is that they were businessmen on their lunch breaks going to get a hand job. They would consider themselves monogamous.
Yep.
They would consider themselves monogamous. And this is just, they're earning, $500,000 a year, whatever. This is just what they do on their lunch breaks. They go to the tantra sex worker during their lunch break to get their tantra massage. And their wives do not know it, and they still consider themselves monogamous, right? That's modern. I was like, oh, this is how people do monogamy. This is what it looks like for white wealthy North America, is they go get hand jobs on their lunch break.
Yeah. So the modern model of relationships, like what you're describing in that like trajectory of like, okay, I'm going to graduate college, we're going to have the white picket fence, like we call that the relationship escalator. But the specifics around it, that is from the nuclear family. Yes. And the nuclear family is a modern invention. It started in like the 40s and 50s, and it was a direct response to what happened during World War II. So during World War II in North America, you had all these men go off to fight in the war and punch Nazis, and the women were left behind, and they filled in the roles that men had done. So women were entering the workplace en masse for one of the first times in modern history, and women were finding the emancipation of that. And then post World War II, you had the rise of socialism. You had this increase in community care, which I think is a very natural thing to happen after a time of war and conflict. We go, how do we stay together? And I spent my early childhood in the UK, and in the UK, that led to the creation of the welfare state, where the state was like, we're going to take care of people. So it kind of like moderated socialism. Mm-hmm. And in North America, it turned into the nuclear family, because they were like, no, we don't want to be socialist. We want to be capitalist. And we have all these factories that we need to do something with, that we're creating ammunitions. Okay, we're going to create appliances. We are scared that women are in the workplace. We want to get women back into the house and being housewives. And so they created this mythology around the way that men and women are supposed to be. And we see this resurgence coming up right now, right? With all the MAGA stuff, right? The trad wife. Mm-hmm.
Which to be fair, I like being at home. I got no problem. I dig it. Like, you can trad my wife me. I'm good. Cleaning and sweeping and gardening. I'm good with that.
And I think part of what appeals about that lifestyle is that it is a simpler, there's less complication, there's and I think there's an aspect that does speak to, like, the homesteading that you're doing is very different.
Yes. Okay.
From that nuclear family, right? Like the trad wife nuclear family model is like, we are good consumers.
Yes.
We have our toaster, we have our oven, and Professor Kim Tallbear has wonderful talks about this, but like the way that it was encouraged for everyone to consume as part of this monogamy. I mean, look at wedding registries. I remember when I got married, when I was doing that, relationship escalator, nuclear family, I was like, we have to have a wedding registry. People have to buy us stuff. Yep. And like, we have to have our own stuff, and it has to be new. And like, all of that template. And so all of this nuclear family, really, it was to create separation, because it takes us away from community, right? If we look at what relationships and what community building is like before the nuclear family, and even in cultures where the nuclear family isn't so predominant, which is hard because like the way that Western media has spread throughout the world, it's everywhere, you know, like everyone's growing up with the sitcoms that come out of the States.
Yeah.
And maybe not everybody, but they're pervasive.
Mm.
And it's before the nuclear family, there was a lot more community sharing. There was a lot more resource open. There was open resources. Like, we have more food. Let's give you some food. We're going to make dinner for everybody. We don't have to have everybody has like their own, I don't know, barbecue. Like, we can have one barbecue in the middle of town and everybody can use that, right? Like, there's a different attitude towards sharing.
And I'm pause you there because I'm also aware of like intergenerational living, right? So like the nuclear family erased granny and grand you put them in the nursing home. I'm not living with your
Yep.
mom, you know.
Yep.
So the intergenerational family units were erased as well. So children no longer could benefit from being raised by their elders. And so that oral tradition also is interrupted because the elders, you know, tell the stories to the children who then carry them on to their families. So this interruption of lineage is what I'm hearing as well with
Yeah.
the nuclear family.
Yeah. So you get this separation, and then you also get this competition,
Ah, yeah.
right?
Sexuality is more than what happens or doesn't happen in the bedroom. Holistic sexology approaches human sexual wellness, activity, and function through a whole person lens.
Unlike the typical Western approach to sexuality, which often separates people into isolated parts, holistic sexology recognizes that all aspects of a person are interconnected. It views human sexuality as a system of being rather than a series of isolated events.
This work is desperately needed now more than ever. The climate of sexual ignorance fuels the climate of sexual violence, and well-educated sexuality teachers and healers are desperately needed to help transform the current landscape.
As a certified holistic sexologist, you are trained to consider all aspects of your clients to understand their collective whole. You will support people in healing and transforming their relationships to their bodies and sexuality to support them in reclaiming their birthright to pleasure.
The Institute of Holistic Sexology offers the only government-accredited holistic sexology certification on the market. Early registration opens November 1st. Go to holisticsexologyinstitute.com to learn more and become a part of the healing and evolution.
Oh, yeah. We're no longer together in a single united cause. We are these individual families and we're in competition. Oh, she's got a new dress. I should have a new dress. Oh, they got the new sports car. We should get the new sports car, right? Like, and you look at all the marketing in the 50s and 60s, like it's all about this. And it's all centered around upholding this idea of this monogamous nuclear family. And speaking to what you were saying, Devi, about like the hypocrisy of like people being supposedly monogamous and seeking out sex work,
Yeah.
right? This is really, really interesting. Mark Michaels and Patricia Johnson, who are biologists, but also sex educators, they wrote about this in their book Designer Relationships, that people have different ways of defining monogamy.
Yeah.
You know, and within that, different definitions of what counts as infidelity.
Yes. Yes.
Because for some people, infidelity is about the emotional connection.
Yes.
If you're having an emotional affair with your coworker, no, that's not allowed. But if you're just getting jacked off,
a hand job at lunch, how could you complain?
Yeah.
It's just a hand job at lunch.
Yeah. And you know, it's, I think the definitions of infidelity can be very personal, and two people might be in a relationship and not have the same definition of infidelity. But that is, I think, really important to like know that infidelity is not as cut and dry as we think it might be. And so even within the definitions of monogamy, right? And if we look historically through Europe, you know, if you had wealth and privilege and power historically through Europe, you could have as many mistresses as you wanted. And even some of the women could take lovers depending on the times and the cultures. And so this idea of sexual non-monogamy was tied to power and privilege.
As it is now, in many ways, as it is now
Yeah.
in modern society.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see, and like with the way that the media tends to report, it has tended to, not always, but it has tended to focus on people who are younger, whiter, thinner, richer, and how they're doing their non-monogamy or their polyamory.
Well, and another point that stood out for me in your book, and I'm still early in it because I like to savor, right? I like to listen and pause and integrate and that sort of thing. But something that has stood out for me is the understanding that pre-colonial North America, like non-monogamy was part of the structure of it was part of the culture previous to colonialism.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my words aren't working today, but the oppression, shall we say, of patriarchy that colonialism brought. But previous to that in North America, having again communal systems of support and love and and nourishment, emotional connection as a source of nourishment, and how that was status quo before the imposition of colonialism that imposed this hierarchy and this male dominated society upon it. So even in North America, for those of us that are of the land of North America, like our roots, our pre-colonial roots are
Yeah.
are not patriarchal monogamy. So understand, so I'm hearing you talk about how, like, in European history, wealth and power, non-monogamy was tied to wealth and power, but in other cultures, shall we call them indigenous cultures, like non-monogamy was just part of the social structure and wasn't dependent on wealth or resources.
Yeah.
It was just
Yeah.
part of how we lived, coexisted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, a lot of First Nations languages here in North America didn't have words to distinguish monogamy or non-monogamy. This concept of monogamy just wasn't there culturally. And if we look to other cultures, like you look through the Levant and all the way through South Asia, there's so many historical examples of um, polygamy or polygyny, like that anybody could take any number of spouses or partners, and they could have been formalized or they could have been informalized, right? And especially when you go into South Asia and Central Asia, you have these wonderful matriarchal approaches to non-monogamy and fraternal polyandry, and like it's there's so many ways that humans will do relationships, and the only place that has said no monogamy is the one and true way. Like that all comes down to again, it's like the European colonial white supremacist, all of that stuff. That's where that comes from. Everywhere else in the world, people have been perfectly happy to be open
Mhm.
until they were told you're not allowed to be.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
So monogamy is a structure that has been imposed upon us culturally, and at the same time, it works for some folks. So is monogamy the problem, or is the type of monogamy the problem? So, for example, Dr. Erickson and I, my husband, we met and we were, that was the beginning of our relationship. It was a polyamorous relationship. It was awesome. It was one of the best relationships of my life. We had so much fun. We all loved each other. It was great. And then the primary, I know this is also an issue in polyamory, but that Chris and that other partner were the primary, and then that primary relationship broke up, and then 6 months later Chris and I got together, and Chris and I are intentionally monogamous. So
Yeah.
it's something that we are choosing for now to meet needs that we have for where we're at personally. But 10 years from now, and we fully intend to be together 10 years from now, that it may look different. 2 years from now, it may look different. But monogamy for us is something, it's a conscious choice that we're making to meet certain needs. So it's not a default, it's not just a reactive thing. It's like we want to choose, we're choosing to have a closed relationship so that we can meet certain needs. And when those needs are met, we can look at opening the relationship to meet other needs.
Yeah. And I think what's beautiful, like this intentional choosing of monogamy, right? With that is what's powerful. So many people who, and like me, like I would talk about this in the book. I was 21, 22 when I got married because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. I didn't have this conceptualization that this thing that was already stirring in me as a possibility was actually something I could do. I was just like, no, this is what I'm supposed to do. But to consciously choose it is different from not having a choice, right? There's agency in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that by some people's definition, are you monogamous, right? Like you define it as monogamy, but you emotionally, you have dear friendships.
Mm-hmm.
You bring other people into your life. You share your resources, right? Like you're not hoarding everything,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And I know that about you. Like I've stayed in your home when you were still living up here. Like and that is counters the nuclear family model. That counters the colonial model of monogamy. The colonial model of monogamy says you have to prioritize your romantic partner and ignore other people. They are siloed. There's a distance that you keep from them. But you are someone who allows other people to come into your heart, that allows other people to come in and share your space, right? And you're doing so in a conscious way, in a relational way, and you still have your boundaries there, and there's a part of that relational field that is still sacred and special and exclusive for you and your husband, right? But it's not that the whole relational field is like dominated by that exclusivity.
So that's interesting because honestly, Mel, it never occurred to me that in the worldview of monogamy, it means that you're emotionally like you can't have friends and you can't have connection and you can't have you can't have love, right? You can't have
Yeah.
communal love, right? So I think in this conversation, what is clear is like there's variations on the theme of monogamy, and not
Yeah.
all monogamy is the same. So the
Yeah.
patriarchal white supremacist version of monogamy is its own very kind of sterile thing, the nuclear
Yeah.
family unit. Whereas not everybody's version of monogamy is the same. Like,
Yeah.
yes, though not everybody's version of monogamy is the same. Like I've been in monogamous relationships and my partner's giving another woman a yoni massage, but I'm like, that's for healing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for some people in a monogamous relationship, it's like, oh, you're looking at pictures of someone on social media
Yeah.
that are sexy pictures. How dare you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that's suffering. Sorry, go on, Alina.
That's okay. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add that that's one of the aspects of your book that I mean, I loved your book all around, but that's one of the aspects that really resonated with my heart, especially at this time in my life, is just framing polyamory or non-monogamy beyond what are just sexual relationships, right? And expanding our scope into our communities in the way that we love other people. And I just like very much sitting with the pain in my heart around that lack in my life as well. Because and hopefully it's okay to share this part of it. I feel like as a young person going through life, I was very intentional about trying to cultivate community and love and like shared family. And uh, when I would break up with partners who I was in love with, I didn't actually leave them. I was like, I love you. You're still a part of my life. Like I still want to be a part of your life, unless there was some sort of like massive rift or rupture, they would continue to be a part of me and a part of my community. And as I've gotten older, I have not been able to maintain that much to the reason mostly being our social structures, right? So those most of those partners were men. And so as they married or got really serious partnerships, I wasn't really allowed to be friends with them anymore, right? And as people had children, as they even my female friends as they got married, like I started getting pushed more and more and more into that nuclear family by way of default from everyone else around me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and I've had similar challenges, you know, that there's, and I think we notice that as we get older,
Mhm.
because more and more people kind of get siloed off, and it's interesting to be in these times where there is a lot of hardship. I think we're experiencing hardship that's a new kind of hardship, right? The economic challenges, the political challenges that are happening. And one of the things that I've observed is this tendency for people to pull away and silo when they feel like they're under stress. And I think there's something in there around like this shame of like I've somehow personally failed because I'm struggling to deal with layer and layer upon layer of systemic oppression. And and so, you know, how do we then come into connection again?
Mhm.
Because it's connection that creates resilience.
Yes.
And I say that my book is a social change manifesto. It's just disguised as a self-help book
Mhm.
because where I take it is like I want this idea of a post-monogamous world. We're not talking about monogamy or non-monogamy. We're talking about a world in which monogamy is no longer the default.
Mhm.
And what happens when it's no longer the default? What happens when we're no longer trying to hoard our love and affection from each other? And we feel safe enough and know ourselves enough to know the boundaries of how we are sharing our love and what we're available to share, which is going to be different for everybody. But when we know what our capacity for sharing is, what becomes possible is a lot more connection and a lot more resilience as a result. And I think that this is so important with what we're going through in the world today. I mean, I think one of the reasons so many people have been interested in non monogamy is we are seeking that deeper experience of connection. We want an experience of attachment that isn't nuclear family based, that isn't dyadic based. We want an experience of attachment that goes back to village, that goes
Mhm.
back to extended family.
Mhm.
And yeah, sex is a great way to cultivate attachment. It's not the only way to cultivate attachment,
Mhm.
but the intimacy that we share can hold space for more attachment. And I think it's important that we expand that idea and go, what it doesn't have to rely on our sexuality or our intimacy, but it's also about just the ways that we care and show up with compassion and empathy.
Yeah. And that piece right there is so important for me in the conversation of polyamory, because so often polyamory is just talked about sex with multiple people. And as you and I, Mel, have spoken privately, it's like people use polyamory and they mean polyfuckery, right? And what they really want to do is just fuck a bunch of people. They don't actually want to love. They just want to fuck. And that's cool if that's what you want to do. Like, no shade for that. And for those folks who are actually looking for polyamory, it means multiple loves. And so I may love the heck out of a lot of people, and that doesn't mean that you have to put your penis in my vagina or I have to put my mouth on your vulva, right? So like we can love each other without the sexual exchange but still be, deeply in love.
And I think there's also a question of, do we know how to love? Do we even know what love is?
Yes.
Because I think in when we look at the way that supremacy culture cuts us off from empathy, cuts us off from our ventral vagal connection, cuts us off from like real, true relationality. Oftentimes, what we interpret as love is more of, I think, it can be sometimes there's a fawn response, there's an appeasement response coming up in ourselves. We don't feel safe, and so we fake a feeling of connection as a strategy for safety, and it's that like, well, if I fake it till you make it kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I think that in a world that is doesn't often give people affection, like even down to the, I mean, it's changed, it's starting to change now, but like even down to the way that infants are raised, like being taken away from your parent as soon as you're born, you know, not being breastfed, like the from a somatic perspective, the connection that happens there is so important for our development of empathy.
Yep.
And so if we grow up without enough empathy in our environment, we don't know that we're not connecting with it, right? It's like it's like you never had something spicy and you're like, I don't know that spice exists. And people talk to you about spiciness and you think you know it, and then you have like a real authentic Indian curry and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is spicy. And and so I think, yeah, there's a lot of not really knowing what that deep love is and what that experience is.
Yeah, because those channels for empathy have been amputated due to the way we're conditioned in white Western culture, like white supremacy
Yeah.
culture. I know folks don't like us saying those words sometimes, but like it's a thing. Like read about it because it really is kind of the key to everything that's fucking us up right now. It really, truly is.
And I
Relationship.
always come back to like white supremacy culture, it wants us to be separated, right? And in Tema Okun's description, she talks about like it wants white people to be separated from BIPOC. It wants BIPOC to be separated from each other, so to have conflict there. And it wants white people to be separated from each other. It
Absolutely.
wants separation. And so to counter that, we have to look at how do we create connection?
Mhm.
And how we create connection is by cultivating more relationality.
And cultivating our own capacity for empathy,
Yeah.
for ourselves and for each other, which I've seen you,
Yeah.
but you've been speaking about, speaking to online. Like that's, I like empathy is the secret sauce,
Yeah.
right? It's the secret sauce. So monogamy is nuanced and does mean different things to different people. Non-monogamy is also nuanced and means different things to people, right? So
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
talk about some of the toxic approaches to
Oh
non-monogamy
God.
because those are the things that have people like, oh, you're polyamorous, like really, like wow. So it's either like I see it either glorified as like, oh my god, all this great sex and blah blah blah, or I see it vilified as like, these people are fucking crazy. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, you already named the polyfuckery part of it, and the approach that is purely sex based. And for what it's worth, I think it's totally fine to say I'm only looking for other sexual needs to be satisfied here. I think it's important to be clear that that doesn't include emotional availability. I think it's important to like have for everyone to know exactly what's available and what's not available, because then people have the agency to make their own decisions and balance that.
buyer beware.
um yeah,
Yeah, buyer
yeah,
beware.
exactly,
Informed consent.
exactly. And I think for some people, sexuality that doesn't include an emotional relationship can be its own kind of healing,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
So that there's got to be space for that. But where I think, in all the different forms of non-monogamy, one of the things that kind of will catch people up is or catch people out is when they are internalizing those monogamous scripts still. So, and a lot of these relate back to white supremacy. So like the idea of primacy and like the hierarchy. And there's a lot of debate in polyamorous circles around hierarchy. And the way that I find it most useful to talk about is power.
Mm.
How is power held or shared? Are we looking at systems of power over and under in the ways that relationships are created? So like primary versus secondary? Or are we looking at how we create more equity in the way that power is shared? And
Huge.
I think that this is not a like one and done. This is a constantly shifting thing, because like I might have more power and privilege because I have been doing this for a long time. Someone else may have more power and privilege because they make more money than I do, right? These are not on the same metrics, but it both create a power dynamic. And so we have to go, okay, where do we find that middle ground where there's equity and also spaciousness in how we are experiencing power in the relationships. And so I see that power play out in the control that sometimes comes up for people in the imposition of rules, vetoing other people's partners, all of these kinds of things. Um, Another thing that often shows up is, the ways that we measure the success of a relationship. Um, I think that there's kind of two sides of this. I think for some people, they're like, well, if I'm not doing this as a lifelong relationship, then it's meaningless. And so treating somebody more callously. And on the flip side, there's people who are like, no, I want this to be a lifelong relationship. I want to keep like growing my personal harem. And 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 then you're just doing like multiple monogamy. And it's like, okay, well, what's that about? Um, and I think neither is a great solution. I think it's really important that we find a way to measure the success of our relationships outside of the ways that we measure monogamous relationships, right? It's not about how long are you together for, it's about the connection and the quality that you create together, right? It's about being true to who you are. And I love this idea of, I talk about the relationship landscape, and that you can transplant a relationship within there, like you were saying, Alaina, like having these incredible relationships where you love somebody and then wanting to transition into a space where you can still love them and they still have other relationships, and not being able to, right? But what if we can allow relationships to shift and be like, okay, we tried growing this here in this part, but it turns out the soil just wasn't right. Turns out it wasn't getting the right light or nutrients. Let's move it over here and see if it does better there. Mm-hmm. And I think that in some experiences of non-monogamy, I see people really struggle with that. I see people go back into the old monogamous behaviors of like, oh, we broke up, that's it, we can't ever talk again. I have to block you on socials. And like sometimes we need to take clear space from access. But when there's still that deep affection, and there's still deep connection, to not be able to do that feels really hard.
So it's as you're speaking, it's like the anchor, the root of polyamory truly is the love, right? It's truly like polyamory, many loves. So it's truly the love is the anchor, and how that love manifests within each relationship is unique to that relationship. But having the openness and the space to love many, but also, maybe fully, like sexually, intimately love many, more than one, shall we say. But again, when we're talking, I guess, ethical polyamory, the focus is the love and the honesty and the transparency of that love, and the intention to hold each other with care.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the essence of all healthy relationships, right? Is how do we hold each other with care and affection and consideration.
So polyamory doesn't seem like too much different than just our basic humanity.
Right.
Right.
And again, like there are so many people who will dabble in polyamory and non-monogamy and end up going, you know what, that wasn't for me, but I learned some really cool things about myself. I've got different tools for relating to my partners in more conscious ways. And I think that's important that we pay attention to that. There's a journey people have gone on when they do that, of unpacking a lot of the internalized normativity stories. And you don't have to be polyamorous to do that.
Exactly. I was going to say that seems so critical, is unpacking the orientation that we have been indoctrinated into, that is, it's not, doesn't work for our benefit and wasn't intended for our benefit, right? It wasn't intended for our benefit. So examining that and then deconstructing that and keeping the parts that may feel resonant or supportive, but not being confined and yoked to an agenda that is the antithesis of our humanity in many ways.
Totally.
Or runs contrary to our basic human nature. Yeah. So along those lines, let's talk about queerness and polyamory. So, more anecdotes, TMI from Davy's side. So, that was one of the things that made polyamory a really obvious thing. Like, again, I was stripper in Detroit. I would bring my girlfriends home from the club, and my boyfriend would be there, and we'd all have a good time, right? That was just like it was normal. And I guess those were polyamorous relationships because those are my sisters from another mister, and I love them. And we all had sex together, and that was just fucking normal. That was just a normal thing, right? And then later on in life, again, being bisexual, to me, it's like, well, yes, I've got a boyfriend, but I need a girlfriend too, or yes, I got a girlfriend, but I need some dick too. So
Relatable.
exactly. So we're just gonna have to make this work because apples are not oranges and oranges are not apples, y'all.
And yeah, and I think queerness is a motivation for a lot of people to start exploring open relationships, and that and even that feeling of like there's a kind of sex I want to have that my partner is not available for, right? Whether it's the same gender or same anatomy or different, like there's, I think a lot of people have that come up at some point. Um, but what I think is really interesting, like if we take the definition of queerness, right? The modern definition of queerness is really around questioning the status quo, right? It's going against the grain of status quo. And queerness does this with gender and with sexuality, because the status quo says, well, you're expected to be cis, and you're expected to be only attracted to the opposite gender, right? And so queerness throws that all out and gets creative, right? Queerness is being creative, being open, being curious, being exploratory. And so like people ask like, well, oh, is polyamory an orientation? And I'm like, for some people, they would say yes. What I say is, well, polyamory is a label that we give to one way of doing non-monogamy. There's lots of ways of doing non-monogamy. But I think that there must be a spectrum of fidelity, and that there's a queering of fidelity that happens within the ways that we explore non-monogamy, right? Just like what we're talking about with like, how are you, what does monogamy mean for you? How are you distributing power? How are you conscious of the power dynamics in your relationships? How are you conscious of the love, affection, and the ways that that is shared in your wider landscape of relationships? When we are going against the grain of what we've been taught to do by culture, we are queering the way that we do relationships. And so I don't think that necessarily gives space for people to be like, oh, I fuck around, so I'm queer. Like, I don't think it would be okay to like take on that labeling necessarily if you don't have other queer identities. But I think it's a useful lens to look at that process through. Because when we go through that exploration of ourselves around, is my gender queer in some way? Is my sexuality queer in some way? There is deep inquiry that has to happen. There's a lot of challenging narratives that have a lot of shaming built around them, right? And we have to find a place to step into our agency and our power against those narratives of shame if we want to be true to ourselves. And we need support to do that. We benefit from community and from peers and from elders who can show us, this is how you do this. You are okay. You are not broken, that you have these desires. And so I think there is a lot of space for us to look at it as a queer way of relating.
One that challenges the status quo and challenges, again, our unconscious cultural conditioning.
Yeah. And I think there's ways that people do polyamory that is not in the least bit queer, right? Like if someone is being very cis and heteronormative about the way they're doing their polyamory, if they're more interested in like having primary and secondary, like they've got this normative approach of how they're doing it, kind of like the businessmen going off on their lunch breaks approaches. That's not questioning the status quo. That's replicating systems of power. That's replicating a lot of the inherited models of how this is permitted to happen within, Western supremacy. And so that I would not say is a queer way of relating. But I think when we're doing it from a more open way of like, how am I loving? How am I showing up? What does it mean to question all these other pieces? Then yes, I think that's a queer way of doing it.
So on that topic, I'm going to bring up something that came up earlier in the year, and that was Aubrey Marcus. And what was he was saying that he radical monogamy because
Yeah. I have to take my glasses off for this because
so he's like, I'm just burned. I'm practicing radical monogamy by inviting another person, and it's y'all are fucked up if y'all don't recognize that this is just me queering monogamy. It's essentially what he's saying. He's queering.
no, not in the least bit. There is absolutely nothing radical about what he's doing. All he's doing is reinventing polygamy. And I mean, like, I'm very clear on my website. I am not the coach for you if you follow Aubrey Marcus. And I had to be clear and explicit about that because there was a time where he had like a polyamory manifesto. And so there were people who were like, I think there's at the surface level, it might seem like we might align on things. Value wise, no, we do not. And I'm just not going to be an enjoyable coach for someone to work with if they really align with his values. And then he like flipped from doing this polyamory into being like, well, I have a monogamous life partner. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I mean, I looked at his polyamory manifesto and I was like, this just sounds like really messy non-monogamy. And when I've listened to the interview with him talking about his radical monogamy, it's a monogamy of 3 or whatever he's calling it. And I'm like, when he's reflecting back on his experiences of polyamory, he's calling it a revolving door of lovers. And I'm like, you weren't loving these people.
No.
You were fucking these people, but you weren't loving these people. And now you've discovered that you can love more people, but you're still doing this in a way that is so heteronormative and so playing into like we still want to call it monogamy. We still want to play into the nuclear family power and privilege that we get presenting not just as a couple now, but as a throuple. And I don't want to deny that like these people probably have a genuine affection and love for each other. I think that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful when people can find that. But the way that they are then platforming themselves based on that and calling it something radical that is totally not radical, it pisses me off, as you might be able to tell.
Because it's a bastardization of the concept. Again, it's a bastardization of the concept purely for positioning for profit because they're experts in the field. So it's gaslighting. It's gaslighting. It's gaslighting, right?
And coming back to the idea of radical, right? To be radical is to work from the roots. And those roots go deep. And we think of radical as being like, oh, it's different, right? That's the kind of modern understanding of radical. So he's saying, oh, it's a different kind of monogamy. And I'm like, no, you are not actually transforming anything here. You're also not creating anything new. This is how people were exploring polyamory in like the 60s and 70s, right? This goes back to like the Ravenhearts and like, who coined the term polyamory. Like it's they're just doing this multiple monogamy, multiple relationship escalators together. And if they found that like perfect triad dynamic, like again, I'm so happy for them if that's working for them and everybody's down. But the platforming of it as being something new and special. And I'm like, this has been around for a long time, buddy.
And something that people should aspire to. And again, it strikes me that I know like next to nothing about Dude. He like came on my radar because of this, people were asking me about my thoughts of this interview he did. But again, looking at in terms of like the modeling, I don't know what his nationality is, but he's fairly white presenting, wealthy, LA, I mean, obviously heterosexual. So it taps into all the power structures,
Yep.
and he's, being presented as a model for people to aspire to. Meanwhile, there's no conversation about wealth. There's no conversation about privileges. There's no conversation about social privileges. Like, how do you, it's not attainable for every dude to just have two women, or every woman that I just have two, like, it's, again, it's smoke and mirrors is the
Yes.
word that comes to smoke and mirrors, and glamour being presented as something radical that folks should aspire to, again, all for marketing, and all so that they
Yeah.
can sell you the next health supplement, essentially, right? So
Yeah.
so we're just trying to sell you Mel's book today, and you won't be disappointed. If you need a supplement, feed your mind, nourish your spirit, especially nourish your spirit by listening to Mel's gorgeous tones in your ear via Audible. Highly recommend that. So Mel, where can people buy your book? This is like you got like a publisher, you got a book deal and everything. This is amazing.
You can buy the book anywhere you normally purchase books.
Hold it up,
So
Elena. Hold it up,
so
Elena.
it's I'll hold my copy up
Yeah,
too.
look at
So
this. Double vision. Radical
um
related.
so it's published by North Atlantic Books, and they're wonderful. They're a non-for-profit publisher, and they have specialized in doing work around somatics, healing, anti-oppression work. So all of their catalog is just like amazing. So it's beautiful to be part of that catalog. And they're distributed by Penguin Random House. So
Beautiful.
anywhere that you get your books from, you can, if they don't carry it in stock, they can order it in for you. And same with audiobooks, Audible or Libro FM, or wherever else you get your audiobooks from, or your ebooks from. And yeah, it's available around the world.
Beautiful. Highly recommend. So there are so many talking points that we didn't get to today, but are included in the book. So again, highly recommend that you listen or read that. Just, I mean, for anyone who's interested in to me, any aspect of sexology, because sexology is about how relationships, whether it's our sexual relationship with ourselves or a sexual relationship with other people, and then all the other types of relationships that revolve around sexual relationships, because we're influenced by everything that we experience. So go ahead and get radical relating in your website, radicalrelating.ca, right?
Yep, correct.
Beautiful, beautiful. And then find Mel on Instagram, and love your posts. Love your posts on Instagram. They're like little daily doses of like medicine, yes, but more like inspiration, but also like brain attunement. Like I find that with I really hate social media, but when I do find myself on social media, the posts that I like, it's like they open little doorways in my mind, and that's what I find with
Cool.
their little touchstones. So very much appreciate that. So yay! All right, my friends, thank you so much for joining us, Mel. It's
Thanks for
wonderful to
having
have
me.
you. Such an honor, such an honor. And thank you everyone for listening. Going to invite you to again to please like and subscribe on your favorite listening platform. So if you're listening to us on iTunes, please go ahead and like the show. Leave us a review, please. We love your reviews. If you're watching us on YouTube, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We are shadow banned on YouTube. Want to keep saying that we are shadow banned. So your liking and subscribing helps. Go ahead and share those videos. And you can find out more about our work at holisticsexualgyinstitute.com. And I can't remember anything else I'm supposed to say. What am I forgetting, Elena?
We have a program opening soon, holistic sexology certification. So check that out too.
You will be hearing the commercial in this episode. You will have heard the commercial in this episode already. So go to holisticsexualgyinstitute.com to learn more. All right. Thanks, friends. We'll see you next week. We appreciate you. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Sex is Medicine, your #1 resource for holistic sex education.
Make sure you like and subscribe to Sex is Medicine on all your listening platforms, and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, where you can get your daily dose of Sex is Medicine videos and episode recaps. Also, make sure you register for your weekly dose of Sex is Medicine at holisticsexologyinstitute.com and send us your questions, please, at questions@holisticsexologyinstitute.com. Thank you so much for listening to Sex is Medicine.